I still remember the morning the realtor called me. Her voice was too polite, too careful. "Lydia, congratulations on the sale." My coffee went cold in my hand. "What sale?" She hesitated. "Your mother finalized the paperwork yesterday. The house on Willow Creek Drive." My heart stopped. That was my house. 10 years of saving every overtime shift, every holiday I skipped to make that down payment. I called Mom. She answered on the second ring, cheerful as ever. "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. It was family money. Your sister needed help. She's getting married, you know." My voice cracked. "You sold my house. It's just an apartment, Lydia. You'll buy another one. You always land on your feet." But it wasn't just an apartment. It was my life. And something inside me broke quietly, the kind of break that doesn't bleed, just hardens. The drive to Willow Creek was a blur of red lights and trembling hands. The closer I got, the more unreal it felt. When I turned the corner and saw the sold sign on the lawn, the world tilted. The porch light was still on like it had been every night since I moved in, but the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Mom was waiting inside, sitting at the kitchen island, like she hadn't just dismantled my entire life. "Why would you do this?" I demanded, throwing my keys onto the counter. "You had no right." She sighed, not even looking up from her tea. "You're overreacting. I only did what any mother would do. Chloe's starting a new life. She and Eric needed a place. They needed my place." My voice rose. "You could have asked. I shouldn't have to ask my own daughter for family help." She smiled thinly. "Besides, you're single, you don't even use all the rooms. That doesn't make it yours," I said. "You can't just sell someone's home because it makes you feel generous." Her tone softened as if pitying me. "You'll thank me later. Families share, Lydia. You wouldn't have that house without me anyway." The words hit harder than I expected. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "The mortgage," she said casually. "Remember I co-signed when you first applied? It made the bank approve you faster. So, technically my name's still on the deed. It was a simple transaction." A simple transaction. She said it like she was talking about groceries, not the 10 years I'd spent counting pennies, skipping nights out, and eating cereal for dinner to build a future. My future. Dad appeared in the doorway, rubbing his temple like this was another argument he'd already given up on. "Let it go, Lydia," he muttered. "Your sister's wedding is next month. Don't ruin it." I turned toward him. You knew he didn't answer. Just walked back down the hall. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The walls around me blurred. Everything smelled like cinnamon and lemon polish home. But it wasn't home anymore. It was a stage where I'd been replaced. "You didn't even tell me," I whispered. Mom set her cup down and reached for her phone. "I didn't think you'd understand. You've always been so practical, focused on numbers, not people. I figured you'd see reason." Reason? My laugh came out hollow. "You forged my future for a wedding gift." She frowned. "Don't be ungrateful. Chloe's your sister. You should be happy for her." Happy. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked to the living room and looked around. The couch I'd saved 3 months for the lamp I'd bought secondhand, and fixed myself the rug I picked out on a freezing night after work. Every inch carried my fingerprints, and now it was all gone. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I asked quietly. "I've helped this family," she said. "You'll see. Things will balance out." No, I thought. They never balance out. Not when one side keeps taking. I walked upstairs one last time. The bedroom still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. The closet door creaked the way it always had. I touched the wall near the window, tracing the small crack. I'd promised myself I'd fix one day. I remembered painting these walls alone at midnight, listening to an old playlist on my phone, promising myself this was the beginning of stability. Downstairs, Mom called out, "Don't take it so personally. You'll get another house. You always do well." That was the problem. I always did well, and that gave her permission to take from me. The strong one she called me when we were kids. The one who didn't need help, didn't need comfort, didn't need protection. That label had followed me like a shadow my entire life. I packed what I could carry, 2 boxes, 1 suitcase. I left behind the heavy furniture, the dishes, the curtains I'd sewn. I walked to the door, stopping just long enough to glance back. Mom stood there, arms folded, as if expecting me to apologize. "You'll regret this," I said. She smiled faintly. "You'll thank me." Outside, the rain started. Of course it did. Charlotte rain was always warm, sticky, relentless, the kind that soaked you before you could run for cover. I didn't run. I stood there letting it pour, letting the cold find every inch of skin it could. My car was parked by the curb, half loaded with my things. I slid into the driver's seat, shivering. The sold sign leaned slightly in the wind. Beneath it, the grass I'd spent summers planting looked greener than ever. Funny how everything thrives after you leave. That night I checked my bank account. The balance was lower than it should have been. The sale money hadn't even reached me because I wasn't on the transaction. My own name was nowhere in the paperwork. I realized then that I hadn't just lost the house. I'd lost proof that I'd ever owned it. When I tried to sleep, the silence pressed down like a weight. I could still hear Mom's voice echoing, that soft, deliberate tone that turned every wound into a lesson. "You'll buy another one." But something in me shifted that night. I wasn't sure what yet, anger, shame, or maybe clarity. All I knew was that for the first time in years, I stopped trying to fix what they broke. I thought about every time Mom had said family comes first. It had always meant their comfort before mine. That phrase used to sound like love. Now it felt like control. I opened my phone and searched apartments for rent. 1 bedroom, nothing fancy, close to downtown. I found one above a laundromat, small enough to feel temporary but private enough to breathe. I signed the lease online without telling anyone. When I closed my laptop, I whispered to the empty room, "Not anymore." It wasn't defiance. It was a promise. The next morning, I drove past Willow Creek one last time. Sunlight hit the sold sign, and for a second, I saw my reflection in it, wet hair, tired eyes, determination in the set of my jaw. I didn't cry. I just stared until the light hurt my eyes. That was the day my mother sold my house, the day she taught me what family really meant, and the day I quietly began to plan how I'd take my life back, brick by brick, deed by deed. The first night in the new apartment was too quiet. The ceiling fan rattled like a clock, counting down my regrets. I sat on the floor, eating instant noodles from the pot, staring at the wall where paint had peeled into shapes that almost looked like continents. No furniture, no curtains, no sound, except for the city hum below. I didn't have to imagine what silence felt like anymore. It had a taste metallic, like the inside of a forgotten can. I lay down and stared at the cracked ceiling until morning. Nobody called. Not Mom, not Dad, not even Chloe. They were busy planning a wedding, and somehow that emptiness made sense. It wasn't the first time they made me feel invisible. When I was a kid, the world already told me where I stood. Our house on Maple Street had 4 bedrooms, but I got the small one near the garage. It had no carpet, just cold linoleum, and a single window that faced the fence. In summer, it smelled like gasoline and humidity. I asked Mom once if I could switch with Chloe. She laughed. "Sweetheart, your sister's delicate. You're the strong one. You don't need all that space." She said it as if being strong meant I didn't deserve comfort. Chloe got the big room with pink wallpaper, a chandelier, and a vanity full of perfume bottles she never used. Every morning, sunlight poured into her room like a stage light. Mine stayed dim, half-shadowed. I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. Every time I tripped over the boxes stacked near my bed, I felt it. Dad was always working or pretending to read the newspaper. He never argued with Mom, not once. "Don't upset your mother," he'd say when she scolded me for little things, leaving dishes to dry, not folding laundry fast enough, forgetting to say thank you when she did something for Chloe. I learned early that in our house, quiet kept the peace. I still remember my 12th birthday. Chloe had a fever the night before, so Mom canceled the small dinner she'd promised me. She spent the day hovering over Chloe's bed, spooning soup into her mouth, singing softly like she was a baby. I sat in the kitchen with a single cupcake I bought with my allowance. The candle melted into a puddle of wax before I could light it. Mom walked in and frowned. "You shouldn't eat sweets, honey. You'll ruin your teeth." She took the cupcake away and left the room. I sat there staring at the empty plate and whispered, "Happy birthday, me." That night I promised myself I'd stop expecting anything. Years blurred together like that. I was the one who fetched the medicine, the one who washed dishes, the one who stood quietly in the corner during family photos because Mom said let Chloe be in front, she's shorter. When I brought home straight A's, Mom barely looked up from her magazine. "Good," she said. "Now help your sister with her project." When Chloe got a C in English, Mom made me rewrite her essay and told her, "You just need encouragement." One winter afternoon, Chloe broke Mom's favorite vase while we were arguing over the remote. Mom rushed in, eyes blazing. "Who did this?" Chloe cried first. I opened my mouth to explain, but Mom already turned toward me. "Lydia, why can't you take responsibility for once?" I took the blame without another word. That night, while everyone watched TV, I scrubbed the floor where shards had fallen, tiny cuts stinging my fingers. When I finished, Mom said softly, "See, I knew you'd make it right. You always do." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. It became a pattern. Chloe's mistakes were accidents. My achievements were expected. She got the praise, I got the chores. Mom's friends used to say, "You're lucky to have a daughter like Lydia, so reliable." Mom would smile and answer, "Yes, thank God she's strong." That lets me focus on Chloe. Every time she said it, something inside me shrank a little. By high school, I stopped arguing altogether. When Mom forgot my choir recital, I told her it didn't matter. When Chloe wore my new sweater without asking and stained it, I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I learned that peace in our house had a price, and that price was always mine. I overheard something once, Mom talking to Mrs. Duncan, our neighbor, over the fence. I was 16 pulling weeds in the yard. Mom laughed lightly and said, "Lydia's so independent. I don't worry about her at all. Chloe, on the other hand, needs constant attention." The way she said it was like bragging about having one child worth worrying about and one who wasn't. I stopped pulling weeds and just listened to the sound of her voice. It was bright, cheerful, and completely sure she was right. That night I packed a small bag. Not to leave, just to remind myself I could. I hid it under the bed, 2 shirts, a toothbrush, a few dollars. It stayed there for years, collecting dust and secret courage. When I turned 18 and got accepted to college, I thought maybe things would change. I worked hard, earned a scholarship in finance. I remember the night I told them. Mom was plating dinner, Chloe scrolling on her phone. I said I got in. Full scholarship. Silence. Dad nodded once. Mom said, "That's nice, honey." Chloe passed the salt. I waited for a smile, a hug, anything. It never came. 2 weeks later, Mom asked if I could delay college for a semester to help Chloe with driving lessons. I said no. That was the first time I saw disappointment twist her face. "You've changed," she said. "All this education is making you selfish." I left home that August with 2 suitcases and the old bag from under my bed. As the bus pulled away, I looked back at the house. Mom was on the porch waving, but not at me. Chloe stood beside her holding the dog, and Mom was fixing her hair, smiling for the neighbors. My dorm room was tiny, barely larger than my childhood bedroom, but it smelled clean and no one told me where to sit. I hung a photo of the ocean above the desk. I'd never seen the ocean then. I just liked imagining something that endless. During my first semester, I called home every Sunday. Sometimes Mom answered, sometimes she didn't. When she did, she mostly talked about Chloe, her new boyfriend, her dance recitals, her future. I stopped calling by spring. The distance didn't make me free right away. It made me lonely, then tired, then determined. I started working at the campus library. To save money, studied harder, graduated early. Each success felt like a secret victory against everything they ever said I couldn't do. Years later, when I started my first job, Mom called out of the blue. "You sound busy," she said. "Chloe's been feeling a little lost lately. Maybe you could talk to her. You've always been the strong one." I laughed softly after hanging up. She still thought that was a compliment. Now, sitting in this small apartment with walls the color of cardboard, I finally understand. Strong was never praise, it was permission. Permission for them to forget me, to take from me, to never ask how I felt. I pour myself another cup of cheap coffee and look out the window. The city hums below, neon lights blinking in puddles. Somewhere out there, my mother is still planning Chloe's perfect life the same way she always did, by using mine as the foundation. But for the first time, I don't feel trapped by that thought. I feel awake. Maybe strength isn't about holding everything together. Maybe it's about walking away before they break you completely. I glance at the small mirror hanging by the door. My reflection looks older, sharper. "You're not invisible anymore," I whisper. I sit down at the desk and open my notebook. The page is blank, waiting. I write 3 words across the top in slow, steady letters: "Build something new." Then I close it, place it beside my phone, and breathe for the first time in what feels like years. The first apartment I ever paid for on my own was smaller than a storage closet, but to me it was freedom. The carpet smelled like bleach and dust, the faucet dripped constantly, and the single window faced a brick wall, but it was mine. I remember standing in the middle of the empty room, the sound of traffic echoing from below, and whispering, "You did this." It wasn't much, but it was proof that I could build a life without anyone's permission. During the day, I worked at a small accounting firm in Charlotte, crunching numbers for companies that didn't even know my name. At night, I poured coffee at a diner near the bus station, smiling at strangers who barely looked at me. I kept a spiral notebook in my bag where I wrote down every expense, every tip, every overtime shift. For years, I lived inside that ledger. I didn't buy new clothes unless something tore. I skipped dinners out, birthdays, holidays. Whenever Mom called, it was always about bills. "Just until next month," she'd say, and I'd send a check. She always ended her messages with, "You're such a blessing." I didn't know blessings came with receipts. My days were long, my nights longer. Sometimes I'd walk home from the diner at 1 in the morning, my shoes sticky from spilled soda, my apron smelling like fry oil. I'd look up at the lit windows of the city and imagine what it felt like to go home to someone waiting for you. Then I'd unlock my own door and find only silence, and for once it didn't feel cruel. It felt earned. 5 years passed like that. Every morning I made coffee and stared at the numbers in my bank account, watching them crawl upward. Every raise, every bonus, every refund became a brick in a house I was building, one deposit at a time. I wasn't saving for luxury. I was saving for safety, for proof that I could exist without being erased. One Friday evening, I ran into Mom and Chloe at a restaurant downtown. They were laughing with a group of women dressed in matching pastel coats. I almost turned around, but Mom saw me first. "Lydia," she exclaimed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You look so professional. You're doing well, aren't you?" I nodded, still holding the to-go coffee I'd picked up for my night shift. "That's wonderful," she said. "Maybe you'll finally buy something worth showing." Her friends chuckled politely. Chloe grinned, twirling her engagement ring, small, glittering perfect. I smiled back and said I already did. Then I walked away. That night I sat at my desk, running my hands over the pre-approval letter from the bank. 10 years of work had led to that single piece of paper. It felt like oxygen. The next week, I toured houses with a realtor who kept calling me Miss Carter like it was a title I'd earned. The first few were too expensive, too far, too loud. Then we drove down Willow Creek Drive, and I saw it, a 2-story brick home with white shutters and a yard full of magnolias. Nothing fancy, just solid, quiet waiting. When I stepped inside, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors. The air smelled like cedar and dust. I could see everything: the bookshelves I'd fill, the small dining table where I'd finally host someone, the bedroom painted pale blue. I told the realtor I wanted it before she finished her pitch. The closing process took months. Every document, every signature felt like reclaiming something I'd been denied. When I finally signed the last page, the agent smiled. "Congratulations, homeowner." The word caught in my chest. Homeowner. Me. The first night in the house, I didn't have a bed yet, just a sleeping bag and a lamp on the floor. I ate takeout on the kitchen counter and listened to the house breathe: wood settling, pipes whispering, the faint rustle of leaves outside. I pressed my palm against the wall and said, "You're safe now." I meant me. Mom didn't visit. Dad sent a short text, "Proud of you, kiddo." Chloe didn't say anything, but when I posted a picture of the front porch online, Mom replied publicly, "Beautiful, honey. By the way, Chloe got engaged." That was all. 10 years of effort reduced to a footnote in someone else's celebration. Still, I built my home piece by piece. I bought furniture second-hand and repainted every surface myself. I learned how to replace a faucet, fix a hinge, change a light switch. Each repair felt like reclaiming control. Some weekends I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to birds, thinking, this is what peace sounds like. One Saturday morning, a neighbor waved from across the street. "You live alone?" he asked kindly. "For now," I said. He nodded like that meant something sad. But it wasn't sad. It was freedom. Sometimes, though, the quiet felt heavier than it should. I'd walk through the rooms at night, flicking lights on and off, just to hear the switch click. I told myself it was to check the wiring, but really it was to remind myself the house was real. That I was real. At work, people started to notice my discipline. My boss gave me a raise, said I had executive instincts. I smiled, thinking of how many times Mom had said I was too practical to be emotional. Maybe practicality was my superpower. Then I met Alex. He was a coworker, funny, patient, the kind of man who always held a door, but never tried to walk it in. We started dating quietly. He brought flowers to the office once, and everyone teased me for days. For a while, I let myself believe that maybe I could have both a home and a heart. But when he proposed a year later, I said no. Not because I didn't love him, but because something inside me froze at the thought of merging lives, of losing control again. He looked hurt, but calm. "You're afraid I'll take something from you," he said. I didn't deny it. When he left, I sat on the porch until sunrise, watching the light crawl over the magnolias. I whispered to the morning air, I just need to build myself first. That summer, I got promoted again. I started investing small, learning everything I could about property mortgages, the loopholes Mom had used to take what was mine. Knowledge became armor. I saved, calculated, and built quietly. My coworkers joked that I treated life like a balance sheet. Maybe I did. At least numbers made sense. Years slipped by in steady rhythm: work, home bills, coffee, repeat. And yet each day carried a quiet satisfaction. I had made it without their help, without their praise. One evening I got a call from Mom. "I drove by your neighborhood," she said. "You really picked a nice house." I smiled faintly. "Thanks, Mom." She hesitated. "Chloe's wedding's next month. You'll come, right?" "Of course," I said. "I'm proud of you," she added, voice almost tender. But I heard something else underneath the calculation. I'd been around her long enough to recognize the sound of someone rehearsing a favor. After we hung up, I stood at the window looking out at the yard. The sun was setting behind the trees, turning everything gold. I thought about all the nights I'd spent, wondering what it would feel like to be loved the way Chloe was, effortlessly, fully. And I realized I didn't need that anymore. Love didn't have to come from them. It could come from peace, from persistence, from the way the floor creaked beneath my own weight, and no one told me to move. I took a picture of the house that evening, the windows glowing in the twilight. I sent it to Mom with a short message. It took me 10 years, but I did it. Her reply came a minute later. That's lovely, honey. By the way, Chloe got engaged again, bigger ring this time. I laughed quietly, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood the truth. I could build 1,000 houses, and they'd still only see the ones they lived in. But that was okay. I wasn't building for them. I was building for me. I locked my phone, stepped outside, and watched the sky fade into dark blue. The crickets sang, the air smelled of rain, and for once I didn't feel like the strong one or the forgotten one. I just felt like a woman who had finally found a place she didn't have to earn. And somewhere deep down, I knew peace never lasts long in a family like mine. But for now, this was enough. It started with an email I almost deleted. The subject line read confirmation of sale Willow Creek Drive. For a second, I thought it was spam. Then I saw my address. My hands froze over the keyboard. I called the realtor immediately, my voice shaking. There's been a mistake, I said. That property isn't for sale. The woman on the other end hesitated. Oh, Miss Carter, congratulations again. Your mother finalized everything yesterday. She said you were busy at work and gave me power of attorney to sign on your behalf. My stomach dropped. She said you two own the property jointly, so I hung up. My chest tightened, heat rising up my neck. My mother hadn't just crossed a line, she'd bulldozed it. I drove straight to their house. The road to Maple Street felt longer than I remembered, like the world was stretching out the distance between who I was and who I used to be. When I pulled into the driveway, Mom was standing on the porch, watering her plants, humming like everything was fine. I didn't knock. You sold my house, I said. She blinked like I'd told her I forgot to buy milk. Lydia, don't be dramatic. We needed to help Chloe. She and Eric couldn't afford their new apartment after the wedding expenses. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. You weren't using all those rooms, she said lightly. It's too much space for one person. You'll buy another place eventually. You're the strong one. I took a step closer. You forged my signature. She rolled her eyes. Don't be ridiculous. I co-signed the mortgage, remember, that gives me partial ownership. The bank accepted my authorization. It's perfectly legal. Legal, my voice cracked. You stole 10 years of my life. Stop exaggerating. She set down the watering can. Family helps family. Your sister needed a start. I laughed, bitter and sharp. So you sold my house for her honeymoon fund. Don't twist it. We didn't sell it to strangers. It's still family. Chloe and Eric have a good future. You should be happy for them. Happy, I repeated, my throat burning. You've done a lot of things, Mom, but this is different. She sighed like I was the one exhausting her. I can't believe you're making me the villain here. I only ever did what's best for you girls. Dad appeared in the doorway, rubbing the back of his neck. What's going on? She's upset about the house, Mom said, waving a hand. I told her it's family business, but she won't listen. Dad looked between us. You signed off on that, right? I turned to him. No, I didn't. She did it without telling me. He frowned, but only for a moment. Well, what's done is done, Lydia. Your sister's married now. Maybe this isn't the time to stir things up. Stir things up, I said softly. Dad, she sold my home. He avoided my eyes. You'll bounce back. You always do. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush me. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of cicadas outside, the way my heart slammed against my ribs. Mom finally spoke again, her voice patient and cold. You're overreacting. You've always been so sensitive about money. You can't put a price on family. I didn't, I said. You did. She folded her arms. I won't apologize for helping your sister. I looked at her and realized she meant it. She truly believed she'd done something noble. Without another word, I left. Driving back to Willow Creek, I prayed it wasn't true. But when I turned the corner and saw the bright red sold sign planted in my yard, something inside me snapped. The magnolias I'd planted drooped in the heat. The front window reflected sunlight like an accusation. My home, my proof of survival, was gone. Inside boxes were stacked neatly in the hallway. Mom had sent movers already. My handwriting still labeled the boxes, books, winter clothes, photos. Someone had written, "To be moved" on top in bold black marker. I picked up a photo from the floor. It was the picture I'd taken the day I moved in, standing on the porch, smiling with paint on my hands. My first real smile in years. Now it was a lie. I sank to the floor and pressed my palms against the wood. The same floor I'd sanded myself. Every scratch, every groove had a memory. I could still hear the creak in the hallway, the whistle from the old vent, the sound of peace I thought I'd earned. A knock on the door made me flinch. It was a realtor, young, polite, holding a clipboard. "Miss Carter, we'll start showing the property next week, but we'll give you time to clear your things." I wanted to scream that it was still my house, that I'd painted every inch with my bare hands, but instead I nodded. Right, of course. When she left, I called the bank. The woman on the line was professional but detached. "Yes, ma'am, the sale was processed under both parties' names. The funds were transferred to the joint account ending in 9,431. Joint account. The one Mom had opened years ago when she claimed she was just helping me manage bills. How much I asked, she told me. I knew the number by heart. The exact amount I'd saved to the dollar. That night I sat in the empty living room surrounded by boxes. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. I thought of all the nights I'd spent dreaming in this house, how I'd stood in the doorway promising myself this would be the place no one could take. But she had. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The tears felt useless now. Instead, I went to my desk drawer and found the old mortgage papers. My name and hers side by side, tied together by fine print and blind trust. I stared at it until the words blurred. By morning, I drove to a coffee shop near downtown and met Mark, the one person who might know what to do. He skimmed through the documents quietly. "She really did it," he said finally. "Technically, if her name was on the deed, she had legal authority to sell. So there's nothing I can do." He hesitated. "You could fight it, but it would drag on for months, maybe years. She'd claim it was mutual consent. You'd spend everything you have on lawyers." I leaned back in my chair, exhausted. "So she wins." He shook his head. "No, not forever." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" Mark smiled faintly. "Learn how the system works, then use it better than they did." The idea burned through the fog in my mind like light. When I left the cafe, the sky was heavy with rain. I didn't bother with an umbrella. The first drop hit my face cold and sharp. By the time I reached my car, I was soaked. I sat there, water dripping from my hair, watching people rush by with their coffees and umbrellas, their little world still intact. I drove back to my apartment, unloaded the boxes, and stacked them neatly along the wall. On top, I placed the contract, the one with her signature. It still smelled faintly of ink and paper, the scent of betrayal, dressed as legality. That night, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote in the corner, "If they can take it once, they can take it again. Unless I learn how to stop them." The words looked too clean, too calm for the storm inside me. But writing them made something shift. I thought about Mom's face when she said family helps family. About Dad's silence, Chloe's oblivious smile, the red "sold" sign on my lawn. I realized I'd been waiting my whole life for them to see me. But maybe it was time they didn't. Maybe invisibility wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Before going to bed, I placed the forged contract in a folder labeled receipts. When I turned off the lights, the room went completely dark, the kind of darkness that felt like an ending. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The day I moved out of Willow Creek, the sky was too bright for how it felt inside me. I stood in the middle of the empty living room, surrounded by boxes labeled in my own handwriting. The air smelled faintly of polish and rain from the open windows. It didn't look like my home anymore, just a shell. Every wall was scrubbed clean, every nail hole patched, every trace of me erased. On the kitchen counter lay a folded note in my mother's cursive. "You'll understand one day." I folded it without reading the rest and shoved it into my pocket. Outside, a moving truck idled by the curb. The new owners were due that afternoon. I'd already given them the keys, pretending to be calm, pretending that this was just business. As I locked the door one last time, a neighbor called out, "Moving again! Didn't you just buy this place?" I forced a smile. Yeah. Life changes fast. The wind blew hair across my face, and for a second I thought I might cry. But the tears never came. They'd already dried somewhere between betrayal and exhaustion. I drove until I ran out of highway and found a small apartment near downtown, one room above a laundromat, with peeling paint and the faint smell of detergent. The landlord handed me the key without looking up from his clipboard. "Rent's due on the first, cash preferred," he said. I nodded. It didn't matter. At least this lease had my name on it and no one else's. That night, I unpacked the Essentials coffee mug lamp pillow. The refrigerator hummed like it was thinking too loudly. I sat on the floor cross-legged, staring at the blank wall. I used to dream of walls covered in art and family photos. Now I just wanted walls that wouldn't be sold without asking me first. Mom texted later that night. "Hope you're settling in. Don't forget Chloe's bridal shower this weekend." I turned the phone face down. The next morning, I found a flyer slipped under the door for Charleston Realty Training Program, Trainees Welcome. I kept it on the counter, not sure why. Maybe because I wanted to know the system that took everything from me. When Saturday came, I showed up at the bridal shower out of some misplaced sense of duty. Mom greeted me at the door like a guest she barely recognized. "Lydia, you made it," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "Try not to make that face. It's a celebration." The house was filled with laughter, perfume, and the clink of champagne glasses. Every detail screamed perfect: white roses, crystal plates, Chloe in a silk dress glowing with happiness. People I hadn't seen in years hugged me with pity. "You must be proud," one aunt said, patting my arm. "Your sister's apartment is beautiful." "It should be," I replied quietly. "I paid for it." She laughed, thinking it was a joke. When Mom raised her glass for a toast, her voice rang out clear and proud. "To Chloe and Eric, the future of our family." We all pitched in to make this possible. I stared at the bubbles rising in my drink, each one like a tiny memory breaking at the surface. All around me, people cheered. No one looked at me. Later, as I left, I overheard two guests whispering near the door. "That's the older sister, isn't it? The one who sold her house for the wedding." "Sold," the other repeated, shaking her head. "What a sacrifice." I didn't correct them. I just walked out into the night, heels sinking into the wet grass. The next day, Dad called. "Your mother's upset," he said. "She thinks you were cold at the shower." I was polite. "You know how she is," he sighed. "She meant well." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my ear. "Did you know about the sale before it happened?" He hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer. "I warned her it might cause trouble," he said finally. "But she's your mother. She wanted to help Chloe. You'll understand when you have kids." "I doubt it," I said and hung up. For a week I went through the motions: work, home, sleep. But the silence in my apartment began to feel different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to rebuild. One evening, while waiting for laundry downstairs, I heard a familiar voice. "Lydia Carter." I looked up. It was Mark, the banker I'd met the day I learned the truth. He smiled, holding a cup of coffee. "Small world. I didn't expect to see you here." "I live a few blocks away," he said. "How's life treating you?" I laughed softly. "Like a thief that left fingerprints everywhere." He nodded. "I read about a foreclosure case last week, made me think of you. Ever considered working in real estate? You'd be good at it." I shrugged. "I don't know the first thing about it." He grinned. "That's how everyone starts." That night, I went back upstairs and took out the flyer from the counter. The next morning, I signed up for the training course. Days blurred into weeks. I worked mornings at the accounting office, attended classes in the evenings. I learned about property law, mortgages, interest rates, contracts, the fine print I'd once ignored. The more I studied, the angrier I became. Not the kind of anger that burned fast, but the kind that sharpened. When Mom called to remind me of Chloe's wedding rehearsal, I told her I was busy. Busy with what she asked, learning how to make sure nobody ever steals from me again. There was a pause, then the sound of her sigh. "You'll let this go someday, maybe," I said. "But not today." The wedding was grand, of course. Photos flooded social media, Chloe in lace, Eric grinning, Mom radiant beside them. I didn't go. Instead, I watched from a distance, literally. I sat in my car across from the church, engine running, watching guests arrive. No one noticed me. They danced that night under chandeliers bought with my past. I didn't hate them for it. I just didn't care anymore. Weeks after the wedding, I heard from an old neighbor that Chloe and Eric had moved into their dream apartment, the same one my mother had bought with my money. "Must be nice," the neighbor said. "They've got everything." I smiled. For now. That winter, I finished my real estate certification. On the final day of class, the instructor said, "Property is power, but understanding property, that's real power." I wrote it down. Months passed, and my life began to rebuild in quiet, deliberate ways. I got a job as an assistant at a small brokerage. The first time I closed a deal, I thought of my old house and how Mom's signature had erased me. Signing that new contract under my own name felt like rewriting the story. One evening after work, I drove by Willow Creek. The magnolia trees were blooming again. The new owners had added a porch swing and painted the shutters white. It looked different but alive. I parked across the street, rolled down the window, and just watched. A soft breeze carried the smell of rain and earth. I whispered, "You're home now," not sure if I was talking to the house or to myself. As I turned the key to drive away, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet certainty that I wasn't lost anymore. I was learning. I was changing. Back at my apartment, I made a simple dinner and opened my laptop to browse listings for foreclosed properties just out of curiosity. The list scrolled by endless names and numbers. Somewhere among them, a small one-bedroom apartment on Elm Street caught my eye. I didn't know then that it would matter. I just stared at it, sipping my tea, unaware that the universe was already setting the next chapter in motion. Before going to bed, I wrote one line in my notebook: "If they can take it, I can take it back." Then I turned off the light and let the silence fill the room, not the silence of loss anymore, but the kind that hums before something new begins. A year passed before I realized I hadn't thought about Willow Creek in weeks. Life had settled into something quiet but steady. My mornings started early with coffee and bus rides. My evenings ended with textbooks spread across the kitchen table. I was no longer Lydia, the victim in my own head. I was Lydia Carter, junior real estate trainee, the woman learning how to read every line that once fooled her. The office I worked for was small, a cracked glass door, 2 desks, and a flickering sign that said Bennett Realty. The pay barely covered rent, but I didn't mind. Every file I touched, every closing I witnessed, every conversation I overheard was a lesson. I took notes in the margins of my planner, deed of trust. 2 names mean 2 owners. Adjustable interest equals trap. I was building an invisible shield, 1 clause at a time. At lunch, I'd sit in the park across the street eating a sandwich while scrolling through real estate news. That's where I first saw her, Chloe, smiling in a glossy photo on my phone screen. The caption read, "Newlyweds Eric and Chloe Dalton share their apartment of happiness." The article showed them in front of a luxury high-rise uptown, all-glass balconies and white marble floors. I stared at the photo until my sandwich went cold. There she was, radiant in her designer dress, standing in the apartment my mother had bought with the money from my house. I zoomed in on her face. She looked like everything I'd never been allowed to be: loved, celebrated, untouched by guilt. I felt something twist inside me, but it wasn't anger. It was clarity. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and started researching mortgage records for that building. It wasn't difficult. Public databases were mercilessly transparent if you knew where to look, and I was learning fast. The next morning, Mark stopped by my office holding 2 coffees. "You look like you haven't slept," he said. "I was studying adjustable rate loans," I replied. He chuckled. "You sound like me 10 years ago." "What's gotten into you, knowledge?" I said simply. "It's addictive." He handed me the coffee. "You're dangerous when you sound like that." We started meeting once a week to go over financial models, contracts, and case studies. He was patient, steady, and smart enough not to ask too many questions about my sudden obsession with mortgage clauses. By spring, I could quote interest schedules from memory. I passed my licensing exam on the first try. When I got my certificate, I didn't frame it. I folded it neatly and put it in a drawer beside the forged contract my mother had once used to steal from me. 2 pieces of paper, one a wound, the other a weapon. Mom still texted occasionally, mostly photos of family dinners or church picnics. I replied with polite one-liners. Dad sent holiday cards. Chloe never reached out, though her life was easy enough to follow online. There were pictures of her yoga classes, beach vacations, brunches. In every photo, she looked like the sun had chosen her. Then one afternoon, a client walked into the office with a thick folder and a familiar last name, Dalton. My pulse quickened. He wasn't Eric, but someone from the same mortgage branch. Apparently, that building had started defaulting on several high-interest loans. When he left, I stayed late combing through records. And there it was, Dalton, Eric, and Chloe co-borrowers. Adjustable rate, rising interest. Payment delinquency noted. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen, the blue glow washing over my hands. The numbers told a story clearer than any confession. Their perfect life was cracking. The next few months confirmed it. Chloe's post changed, fewer smiles, captions about focusing on gratitude. Then nothing for weeks. Eventually, rumors surfaced through coworkers who read local gossip blogs. Eric had made risky investments. Debts piled up. The apartment of happiness wasn't so happy anymore. When I met Mark for coffee, he noticed my calm. "You've been quiet," he said. "Just watching a lesson unfold," I said, stirring my drink. He gave me a knowing look. "You're not thinking of getting involved?" "Not yet," I said, "but I'm paying attention." I started driving by the building sometimes after work. It was sleek and modern, perched above the city like it believed it could never fall. But I knew better. Everything looks unshakable until the paperwork says otherwise. One night, as I parked nearby, I saw Chloe through the glass lobby doors. She stood there arguing with Eric, her voice sharp, her hands trembling. She looked older, worn down. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something colder, distance. They had taken my house, but I'd taken back my peace. A few days later, I got a call from Mom. "Have you spoken to your sister?" she asked. "No. She's having a hard time. Things with Eric are complicated." "I'm sure they are." "She doesn't deserve this," Mom continued. "They're behind on payments." "The bank, I know," I said, cutting her off. "I read the reports." She went silent. What I work in real estate now. I know how it works." There was a long pause. "Then maybe you can help. You're good with numbers. You could." "Mom," I interrupted again, softly this time. "I already helped. 10 years of it. That's enough." She sighed heavily. "You're cold." "No," I said. "I'm just not your safety net anymore." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I poured a glass of wine and opened the mortgage portal again. Payments overdue. Interest accumulating. Foreclosure proceedings pending review. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. The irony was almost poetic. Days turned into weeks. I threw myself into work, closing small deals, helping clients navigate tricky clauses. Each successful contract felt like reclaiming another inch of ground I'd lost. I no longer avoided the words home or ownership. They were mine again, reshaped by knowledge instead of fear. One evening, Mark and I sat at our usual cafe, watching the city lights flicker. "You ever think about revenge?" he asked suddenly. "Every day," I said honestly, "but not the kind you think. I don't want them to suffer. I just want to be the proof that they were wrong." He smiled. "That's colder than revenge. That's evolution. When I got home that night, there was another message from Mom. This one desperate, please call me. We're in trouble. I didn't call. Instead, I walked to my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote one line. Knowledge is leverage. Silence is armor. Outside, thunder rumbled across the skyline. Rain streaked down the window, blurring the city into shades of silver. I closed my eyes and listened. Somewhere across town, Chloe's perfect life was collapsing under the same storm. And for the first time, I wasn't the one getting wet. I smiled faintly, turned off the light, and went to bed. The news alert came in while I was in a meeting. My phone buzzed on the table, lighting up with a headline that froze the room around me. Local entrepreneur under investigation for fraud, Eric Dalton, co-founder of Dalton Digital Solutions. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at his name, letting the words sink in like a slow, quiet echo from the universe. When the meeting ended, I stepped outside, the afternoon sun glaring off the glass buildings. I sat on a bench, finally reading the article. It was short clinical allegations of embezzlement, frozen accounts, unpaid investors. Beneath the text was a photo of Eric and Chloe, smiling at a charity gala, her hand on his arm, his tie slightly crooked. I remembered that same smile the day I saw him at their wedding reception, laughing as if nothing in the world could touch him. Now the world was touching him back. I closed the article, slipped my phone into my bag, and walked to a coffee shop. When I ordered, the barista glanced at me. Rough day, I smiled faintly. Not for me. The city felt different that day, lighter, quieter, as if the air itself was listening. In the reflection of the cafe window, I looked calm, but inside something deep and old was stirring. It wasn't joy, it wasn't pity either. It was recognition. That evening, Mark called. "You've seen the news I have." He hesitated. "They're losing everything. Word is the bank's freezing their assets." I leaned against the counter. "The same bank that handled my sale, the very one." A pause stretched between us, heavy but alive. "You're not thinking of doing anything rash, are you?" he asked carefully. "Not rash," I said. "Just right." After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at my kitchen table, pulling up the foreclosure listings again. There it was, 1729 Elm Street, Unit 504. The address burned into my memory like a scar. The apartment my mother had bought for Chloe and Eric using the money from my house. The listing showed pending foreclosure. I stared at it until the letters blurred. I whispered to myself, "Justice doesn't rush. It waits." The next morning, the gossip pages were full of it. Photos of Chloe leaving a boutique, hiding behind sunglasses, her expression brittle. Comments flooded and people debating, sympathizing, judging. The image of her perfect life began to fracture in public. Mom's Facebook account went silent. Dad stayed invisible as always. That weekend, I saw them in person for the first time in almost a year. I was standing in line at the grocery store when I heard the sound of her voice behind me. "Excuse me, could you grab that carton of eggs for me?" I turned around slowly. Evelyn Carter stood there, thinner than before, makeup heavy enough to hide the fatigue in her eyes. She froze when she saw me. "Lydia, Mom." We stared at each other, two women holding opposite ends of a bridge that had already burned. "You look well," she said carefully. "You too," I said, though it wasn't true. She fumbled with her purse. "We've been meaning to call. Things have been difficult." I read about it. Her lips pressed tight. "Don't believe everything you see online. Just the legal filings," I asked. Her composure cracked for a second. "You think this is funny, no?" I said. "I think it's predictable." Her hand trembled as she picked up her basket. "I'm sorry things turned out this way. We were only trying to do what's right for Chloe. And what was right for me." She didn't answer, just said softly, "You're still angry." "No," I said, taking a breath. "I'm just done pretending not to see what you are." Her eyes glistened, but I didn't stay to watch her cry. When I walked outside, the air felt thick, heavy with approaching rain. I stood in the parking lot, the sky gray above me, and thought about what Mark had said. "Don't do anything rash." But this wasn't rash, it was math. The following week I requested access to public foreclosure schedules. It wasn't difficult. My real estate license gave me access to the same listings banks used. The Elm Street apartment was set for auction in 45 days. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I just printed the document and pinned it above my desk. In the days that followed, everything seemed to unravel for them. Chloe's luxury photos vanished from social media, replaced by a single post about taking time offline. News outlets reported that Eric's assets were seized pending investigation. Evelyn tried to sell old furniture online. Someone forwarded me the listing. The description said, "Used but beautiful, great memories." I almost laughed. Then one afternoon Mom called. Her voice was fragile, rehearsed. "Lydia, I need to talk to you. I'm listening. It's about the apartment. The bank is making a mistake. They're trying to take it, but we just need a little time." I said nothing. "You're good with this stuff now," she continued. "You could help us. I'll pay you back." I almost laughed again. "You'll pay me back with what?" She hesitated. "We're still family. That's the same thing you said when you sold my house." Her voice rose desperate now. "You can't still be holding on to that. It's been years." "It's been 1 year," I said quietly. "And I'm not holding on to it, Mom." "You are. Every time you call, every time you expect me to fix what you broke." She exhaled shakily. "You don't understand pressure. You don't know what it's like to choose between your children." "I do," I said, "because you already did." There was silence on the line, then a soft click as she hung up. That evening, I went for a walk to clear my head. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement. Every car that passed threw water up onto the sidewalk, but I didn't move. I let the cold mist touch my skin. Somewhere across town, Chloe was probably packing boxes, blaming the economy, the bank, everyone but herself. And my mother was likely sitting at her kitchen table, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. I didn't wish them pain. I didn't wish them anything. When I got home, I found an email waiting from the mortgage office. Foreclosure, confirmed, auction date pending. My pulse stayed steady as I read it. Then I opened a fresh document on my laptop and began writing numbers down: payment estimates, loan structures, reserve prices. My mind worked cleanly, efficiently. This wasn't revenge anymore, it was restoration. 2 weeks later, Mark noticed the paper on my desk. "You're really going to do it, aren't you?" I looked up at him. "If the universe gives you a chance to buy back what was stolen, would you say no?" He sighed. "Just make sure you're doing it for peace, not punishment." "I'm doing it for closure," I said. He nodded slowly. "Then I'll help you." That night I lay awake listening to the rain. The apartment was warm, but the air felt electric, charged with something old finally shifting. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who scrubbed floors while her mother praised someone else's success, the one who left home with 2 suitcases and no goodbye. I whispered into the dark, "You made it." And somewhere deep in me, she whispered back, "Not yet." I turned over, closed my eyes, and dreamed of a wooden gavel hitting a desk, of a voice saying, "Sold to Miss Carter." Justice wasn't loud. It was steady. It was patient. It was coming. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Wednesday morning, printed on white paper, with neat black lettering, the kind that looks harmless until you read what it says. Notice of trustee sale, 1729 Elm Street, Unit 504. The apartment my mother had bought for Chloe and Eric, the one she'd traded my house for, was scheduled for auction in 30 days. I read it twice slowly until the words stopped moving. Then I folded the page and slipped it into my planner right beside the old copy of my own deed. At the office, the day went on as if nothing had changed. My coworkers chatted about weekend plans, Mark reviewed files, and I filed closing reports with mechanical precision. But under the hum of printers and the click of keyboards, there was a strange, quiet rhythm in my chest, something between calm and anticipation. By evening, my phone was full of messages from Mom. "Call me back. We need to talk. It's urgent." I didn't reply. I already knew what she wanted to say. 2 days later, she called the office directly. I don't know if you've heard, she said, trying to sound casual, but the bank's making a terrible mistake. They're foreclosing on Chloe's apartment. I leaned back in my chair. That's not a mistake. What do you mean? It's called consequence, Mom. It's what happens when you spend money you don't have. Her breath caught. Don't talk to me like that. You're better than this. You've always been the sensible one. I learned it from watching you, I said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, She's your sister, Lydia. You can't let her lose her home. I almost laughed. You didn't mind when I lost mine. This isn't the same. It's exactly the same, she inhaled sharply. You've changed. I had to, I said, and hung up. That night I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the foreclosure schedule again. The auction would be held at the Mecklenburg County Courthouse, open to the public. Anyone could bid. Anyone with enough cash, that is. Mark called around 9. You're quiet tonight, I'm thinking. He hesitated. About Elm Street, yes. You could bid on it, he said softly. You qualify. You know the system inside out. I turned the page of my planner, staring at the blank space where the next month's notes would go. It wouldn't be revenge, I said. It would be correction. Then do it, he said. But keep your hands clean. Let the paperwork do the talking. I smiled. It's the only language they ever listened to. By the end of the week, news about Eric's scandal had hit the local papers. Investors demanded restitution. Chloe deactivated her accounts. The same social media that once worshipped their perfect life now dissected their fall post by post. The comments were ruthless fake people finally exposed, but I didn't read them for pleasure. I read them like a record of balance being restored. Mom must have felt the pressure because she showed up at my apartment unannounced on a rainy Sunday. I heard her before I saw her heels on the stairs, the faint smell of her perfume that forced confidence in her knock. When I opened the door, she was already speaking. Please, Lydia, we need your help. Her hair was damp, her lipstick smudged. I'd never seen her look small before. I told you not to come here, I said. I didn't know where else to go. That's because you never had to. She flinched. I know you're angry. I'm not angry, I interrupted. I'm aware. She looked around my apartment, taking in the modest furniture, the stack of files on the coffee table, the life I'd built from scraps. You've done well for yourself, she said softly. You could buy the apartment I finished for her. You want me to save Chloe. Her eyes filled with tears. It's not about saving anyone. It's about family. I stared at her. You used that word like currency. You spent it until it meant nothing. She swallowed hard. You don't mean that. I do. She looked at me then, not as a daughter, not even as a person, but as something unrecognizable. You've become cold. No, I said. I've just stopped melting for people who set fires. She left without another word. The door clicked shut, leaving behind only the faint smell of rain and desperation. That night, I logged into the foreclosure portal and filled out the bidder registration form. My name, my license number, proof of funds. The process was simple, efficient, fair. As I clicked submit, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. The following weeks unfolded like a slow unraveling of everything that had once defined us. Mom's calls grew fewer. Chloe's silence louder. From coworkers and local news, I learned that the Daltons had defaulted on multiple accounts. Their luxury car was repossessed. Their wedding gifts pawned. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't need to. The universe was simply doing its job. Still, some nights I caught myself remembering small things. Chloe crying over a scraped knee, Mom brushing her hair, Dad humming off-key in the kitchen. Memory softened cruelty, but it didn't erase it. On the eve of the auction, I sat on the floor surrounded by paperwork, bank statements, contracts, the original deed from Willow Creek. I ran my hand over the crisp edge of the foreclosure notice, then picked up a pen and wrote one sentence across the top. This time my name will stay. The morning of the sale was bright and cloudless, cruelly cheerful. I dressed simply gray blazer, black slacks, flats. Nothing extravagant. I didn't want to look like vengeance. I wanted to look like closure. As I drove downtown, the radio played softly a song I didn't recognize. The lyrics were about coming home. I turned it off. The courthouse steps were crowded when I arrived. Investors, brokers, curious onlookers, all waiting for their chance at a bargain. I spotted Mark across the courtyard holding a folder. He nodded once. No words. Inside, the air was cool, sterile. The auctioneer's voice carried easily, reading the legal jargon in monotone. Property 1729 Elm Street, Unit 504, starting bid at $460,000. And there she was, Chloe, sitting beside our mother in the back row. Her face pale, hands clenched in her lap. She didn't see me at first, but Mom did. Her eyes widened, then darted away. I took my seat near the front, my heartbeat evenly steady as a metronome. The bidding began. One man in a navy suit raised his hand first. Another countered. I waited silent, timing my move. When the price hovered just above the market rate, I lifted my bidder card. $475. The room shifted. The man beside me glanced over, measuring me. Another bid followed. I raised again, calm, deliberate. Mom's whisper cut through the air from the back. She's not really, she wouldn't, but I did. The gavel fell 20 minutes later. Sold. To Miss Lydia Carter. The sound of it was soft, almost anticlimactic, but inside me, something enormous settled. As I walked forward to sign the papers, I caught my mother's eyes. She didn't speak. Chloe's lips trembled. I didn't stop. When the clerk handed me the documents, I signed cleanly, my name sharp and whole. Outside, sunlight poured over the courthouse steps. The city buzzed around me, unaware that an entire story had just come full circle. I folded the papers neatly, tucked them into my bag, and exhaled. Justice hadn't shouted. It had whispered. And I had finally listened. The morning of the auction felt too bright, as if the world didn't know what was about to happen. I stood in front of my mirror, fastening the single button of my gray blazer. My reflection stared back, steady, composed, unreadable. I didn't look like the girl they used to call the strong one. I looked like someone who'd learned that strength wasn't endurance, it was precision. Outside, the city was waking up. Car horns, the hum of traffic, the smell of coffee from the shop downstairs. I slipped my folder into my bag, documents, proof of funds, and a worn photograph of my old house on Willow Creek. I'd kept it folded behind my ID for years, not as nostalgia but as a reminder. By the time I reached the courthouse, the steps were already crowded. People stood in small groups, murmuring about the properties up for sale, trading numbers like gossip. The air was crisp-touched with early autumn chill. Mark met me near the entrance, holding a manila envelope. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready since the day they sold my house," he smiled softly. "You don't have to talk to them if they're here. They'll talk anyway," I said. "They always do." Inside, the auction hall smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. Rows of folding chairs faced a wooden podium where the auctioneer sorted through files. His assistant set up the microphone, tapping it twice. "Lot 1 property located at 1729 Elm Street, Unit 504, the auctioneer announced. The words echoed through me like a slow drumbeat. That address had once meant betrayal. Now it was opportunity. I took a seat in the second row. Mark sat beside me, quietly scanning the crowd. Investors with shiny watches, realtors with tablets, a few curious bystanders. And then I saw them. At the back of the room, Mom and Chloe. Mom wore her pearls, the same ones she'd worn to Chloe's wedding. They looked dull under the fluorescent light. Chloe sat stiffly beside her, hair pulled back, her eyes red from sleeplessness. The sight of them didn't sting like I expected. It felt distant, like watching old footage of someone else's life. Mom's gaze swept the room and stopped when she saw me. Her mouth parted slightly, then she looked away. Chloe whispered something, but I couldn't hear. The auction began. The auctioneer read the terms: cash deposit, closing deadlines, no contingencies. His voice was steady, businesslike, but every word sounded like judgment. "Opening bid $460,000, he said. A man in a navy suit raised his hand immediately. 470. Another investor countered. 475. I waited. The rhythm was familiar, numbers rising like tidewater. My pulse stayed slow, controlled. Do I hear 480? I lifted my paddle. 480. Mark glanced at me, nodding once. The auctioneer pointed. 480 to the lady in the second row. Mom's head jerked up. I felt her eyes on me, heavy, searching. I didn't look back. The navy suit countered again. 485. I didn't hesitate. 490. The room fell quiet, a few murmurs rippling through the crowd. The auctioneer smiled. 490 from bidder 73. I knew what he saw. A calm woman in a gray blazer, steady voice, no sign of nerves. He didn't know that, under the table, my fingers pressed against my knee, grounding me. Do I hear 500? The man hesitated, whispered something to his partner, then shook his head. Going once, going twice. Before the gavel fell, another voice called from the back. 500. Every head turned. Mom's voice carried clear and tight. Her hands trembled as she held up a bidder card. Chloe's eyes widened. The auctioneer blinked. 500 from bidder 91. I exhaled slowly, meeting her gaze for the first time. She didn't look confident. She looked terrified. I raised my paddle again. 510. Mom's lips parted, her breath uneven. She lowered her card. 510 going once, going twice. The gavel hit the podium. Sold to bidder 73. Congratulations, Miss Carter. The sound was quiet, almost gentle, but it thundered in my chest. I stood smoothing my blazer. The room buzzed around me, papers shuffling, footsteps echoing, but I barely heard. I walked toward the clerk's desk to sign the purchase agreement. My name flowed onto the page with a calm certainty I hadn't felt in years. From the corner of my eye, I saw Chloe tug on Mom's sleeve, whispering urgently. Mom stayed seated, staring straight ahead as if the floor might swallow her. When I finished signing, the clerk handed me a folder. Congratulations, Miss Carter. You're the new owner. Owner. The word landed like sunlight. Outside, the sky had turned bright blue. I stepped onto the courthouse steps, breathing in air that felt cleaner than it should have. Mark joined me, sliding his sunglasses on. Well, he said, how does it feel? I looked down at the papers in my hand. Like gravity finally remembered who it belongs to, he smiled. You did it quietly. That's what makes it powerful. I learned from the best, I said. We stood there for a moment, the city moving around us, ordinary people with ordinary errands. To them, this was just another sale, but to me it was everything. Behind us, I heard the click of heels on stone. Mom's voice followed. Lydia. I turned slowly. She stopped a few feet away, out of breath, eyes wet. Chloe lingered behind her, silent. You really bought it, Mom said. I did. Her voice trembled. Why, because you taught me how. I said. You taught me how to sign papers without permission? I just signed this one for myself. Her mouth opened, then closed. We're still family. I tilted my head. You sold that, remember? For a moment she looked like she might reach for me, but she didn't. She just stood there, clutching her purse like it was armor. You'll regret this one day, she whispered. I already did, I said, and turned away. Mark and I walked to the car in silence. When we reached the curb, he handed me a small envelope. You'll get the official deed in a few weeks, he said. I know. He studied my face. What now? I said. I go home. That night, I placed the purchase documents on my dining table and stared at them for a long time. My name, my own name, was printed across the top in bold letters. Lydia Carter, sole owner. The apartment I'd lost had become the proof of everything I'd built since. I poured a glass of wine, went out to the balcony, and watched the city glow beneath me. Somewhere out there, my mother was probably crying, and Chloe was probably blaming everyone but herself. But for the first time in my life, their noise didn't reach me. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. I took a slow sip and whispered, "It's over," but it wasn't bitterness I tasted, it was release. Inside, my phone buzzed a message from Mark. Congratulations again. Closure looks good on you. I smiled, set the phone down, and looked at the papers one last time. A year ago, they'd erased my name. Today, I wrote it back myself. It had been 3 weeks since the auction when they showed up at my office. The receptionist buzzed me, mid-meeting, her voice uneasy. "There are 2 women here asking for you. They say they're family." For a second, I couldn't breathe. I knew exactly who it was. I straightened my blazer, closed the spreadsheet on my screen, and said, "Send them in." When the door opened, I almost didn't recognize them. Mom looked older, the kind of tired that money can't cover. Chloe stood slightly behind her, thin and pale, a shadow of the girl who used to glow in every photograph. Their eyes darted around my office, simple, neat, not grand but solid. A space built on my own terms. Mom smiled first, that brittle kind of smile that had fooled people for years. "You've done well for yourself," she said. "I had a good example," I replied. She blinked at the edge in my voice. Chloe looked at the carpet. "We didn't come to fight," Mom said. "We just need a little help." I leaned back in my chair. "Help," I repeated. "That's a familiar word." Mom clasped her hands together on her lap. "Things have been difficult since the foreclosure. Your sister's trying to find work. Eric? Well, he's gone. We've had to move in with a friend temporarily. I know it's asking a lot, but if you could just lend a hand until we get back on our feet." "Lend?" I interrupted softly. "You mean the way I lent you 10 years of my life?" Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "It's not." I stood, walking to the window. "You sold my house, Mom. You didn't even call. You didn't ask. You just signed my name and told yourself it was for family." She looked down. "I was trying to help your sister start her life. By ending mine, I turned to face her. You called it sacrifice. I call it theft." Chloe flinched at the word. "Lydia, please," she said quietly. "I didn't know the whole story." I looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't want to know. That's the difference." Tears filled her eyes. "We're not bad people." "No," I said. "You're just people who thought I wouldn't notice." The room went silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. I could feel the distance between us, not physical, but made of years of neglect, of apologies that never came. Mom cleared her throat. "Maybe we can put the past behind us. If you let us rent the apartment back, we can pay you monthly. You wouldn't even have to see us. It would just be business." I walked back to my desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder. Inside was a single document. I placed it gently in front of her. "It's already spoken for," I said. She frowned, picking it up. "What do you mean?" "It's part of a housing program I started," I said, "for women who lost homes because of family manipulation or financial abuse. The first unit goes to a single mother and her daughter next month." Mom stared at the paper, her hand trembling. "You're giving it to strangers?" "Not strangers," I said. "Survivors." Her eyes flickered with something, shame maybe, or disbelief. "You're using it for charity. I'm using it for peace." Chloe began to cry softly, pressing her fingers to her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted things to go this way." "You never wanted to lose," I said. "That's not the same as regret." Mom's voice rose shaky but sharp. "You're bitter. That's what this is. You want us to suffer." I looked at her evenly. "I don't want you to suffer. I just don't want to be your safety net anymore." Her lip trembled. "We're your family." "No," I said quietly. "You're the people who taught me what family shouldn't feel like." For a moment, no one moved. The silence was so complete that I could hear the ticking of the small clock on my bookshelf. Mom stood clutching her purse. "One day you'll regret this." I met her eyes. I already did. For 32 years. She hesitated, then turned toward the door. Chloe lingered, wiping her tears. "You really won't help us?" she asked. I softened my voice just slightly. "I did help you. You just didn't like the form it came in." When they left, the air in my office felt lighter. I sat down, folded my hands, and stared out the window at the skyline. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. That evening, I drove to the apartment on Elm Street. The keys were still in my purse, though I hadn't stepped inside since the day of the auction. The building's lobby was quiet, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected back versions of me. I barely recognized tired, calm, free. When I opened the door, the smell of fresh paint greeted me. The new tenants hadn't moved in yet, but the space was clean and bright. I walked slowly through each room. The kitchen, the narrow hallway, the balcony that overlooked the city. I stopped in the living room where a faint patch of sunlight stretched across the floor. That was where the red sofa used to be, the one Chloe bragged about on social media. I imagined the parties, the laughter, the clinking of glasses that had once filled this place. All of it gone now. I placed my bag on the counter, took out the deed, and set it down. My name gleamed in black ink. Lydia Carter, sole owner. The sight of it didn't make me smile, it made me still. In the quiet, I could almost hear my mother's voice from years ago. "You don't need much space, sweetheart. You're strong." And now I thought she was right. I didn't need much space. I just needed space that was mine. Outside, the sun dipped lower, washing the room in gold. I stood at the window watching the street below. A mother walked by, pushing a stroller, laughing with her child. The sound drifted up through the open glass, soft and alive. I whispered, "That's who this is for." Before leaving, I walked to the small study where I'd kept all the legal files. I pulled one drawer open and laid the old forged contract on top of the stack. The paper that once bound me to their betrayal now sat beneath the document that freed me. When I closed the drawer, the lock clicked with a satisfying sound. Back in my car, I sat for a long time before starting the engine. The city lights were just beginning to glow one by one like tiny promises. My phone buzzed a message from Mark. "Everything settled," I typed back, "more than settled. Closed." He replied, "You did the right thing." I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, "Sometimes the right thing isn't warm, it's just clean." I drove home with the windows down, the night air cool against my face. Somewhere behind me, Mom was probably pacing, angry and hurt. Chloe was probably crying into her pillow. But the weight of their emotions no longer belonged to me. When I got home, I poured a glass of water, kicked off my shoes, and sat by the window. The city stretched out before me, lights, rooftops, moving cars, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small in it. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee, and looked at the photo of my old house on Willow Creek pinned to the fridge. I smiled faintly and whispered, "We're even now." Then I turned off the light and walked out, leaving the past exactly where it belonged behind me. The morning light streamed through the blinds, spilling across my desk in quiet gold. I had grown used to mornings like this, still peaceful mine. For the first time in years, there was no chaos to brace, for no apology to prepare, no phone vibrating with someone else's emergency. Just the soft hum of my coffee machine and the steady rhythm of my breathing. Sometimes peace felt foreign, like a room I wasn't sure I deserved to walk into. But that feeling was fading. I poured my coffee, opened my laptop, and stared at the dozens of unread messages waiting in my inbox. Congratulations from colleagues. Thank you notes from women in the housing program. I'd started a few press requests I'd been ignoring. The world wanted a comment on my story. I wasn't sure I had one to give. At the top of my inbox was an email from one of the women we'd helped, a single mother named Anna. She'd written, "I've been sleeping through the night again. My daughter says this new apartment smells like sunshine." I smiled at the line and let the warmth of it settle over me. That was enough. The media had turned my story into something else. A redemption arc, a family feud, a morality tale about karma. But the truth was quieter. It wasn't about revenge or even justice anymore. It was about breathing again, about rebuilding, about finding a home inside my own silence. The silence had once been a punishment. Now it was a choice. I took a sip of coffee and glanced around my apartment, the plants on the sill, the books stacked neatly beside the couch, the framed deed to the Elm Street apartment hanging on the wall, not as a trophy, as proof that what was taken could be rebuilt. Mark stopped by later that morning, as he often did. He knocked once before letting himself in, holding a paper bag that smelled like croissants. "You still allergic to days off?" he asked. "Not allergic," I said, "just cautious." He grinned, setting the bag on the counter. "You know, most people would have taken a vacation after what you pulled off." "I'm not most people." He studied me for a moment. "No, you're not. But you could at least celebrate." I did. I gestured to the mug in my hand. "Coffee's stronger when it tastes like freedom." He laughed, then grew quiet. "I read the article about you," he said. "They called you the woman who bought back her silence." I raised an eyebrow. "That's dramatic." "It's true." I looked out the window at the skyline where cranes moved slowly against the bright morning. "I guess silence isn't the absence of noise anymore," I said. "It's control." Mark nodded. "So what's next for you?" "The program," I said. "It's growing faster than I expected. We just got approved for a grant. I'm hiring a team." "That's incredible," he said. "You're turning your pain into purpose." I smiled softly. "It's better than letting it rot." He handed me a pastry, and we ate in comfortable quiet. When he left, he paused at the door. "You know," he said, "you don't have to carry the whole world on your shoulders. You deserve rest, too." "I'm getting there," I said. And I meant it. After he left, I went through some of the letters we'd received. Stories from women who had been evicted by ex-husbands, cheated by business partners, or left behind by families who thought they were disposable. Each one felt like a reflection of some version of me I'd left behind. I kept every letter in a blue folder, marked reclaimed. In the afternoon, I walked to the post office to send documents for the new properties we were acquiring. The air outside was crisp, the kind of day that felt like a promise. As I passed a newsstand, a headline caught my eye: "Former socialite Chloe Dalton files for divorce." I paused for a moment, reading the smaller print: "Allegations of fraud, unpaid debt, seeking privacy during this time." I stood there watching the words blur. I felt nothing. No thrill, no victory, no pity, just distance. When I got home, I lit a candle on the counter and sat on the couch. The soft scent of cedar filled the air. I reached for my notebook, the one I used to write in when I still measured time by survival. Now the pages were full of ideas for the foundation, lists of contact sketches for workshops. Progress, not pain. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Silence is not empty. It's full of answers." As evening fell, I walked to the balcony, watching the city soften into dusk. The lights in the buildings flickered on one by one like quiet declarations that life was still going on. Somewhere out there, my mother still lived in that small rental house. I hadn't heard from her since the visit to my office. The last thing she'd said echoed sometimes, "One day you'll regret this." But regret wasn't something I carried anymore. I had unpacked it, examined it, and left it behind. The wind picked up, rustling the papers on my desk. I reached over and held one down: the latest report from the Willow Project, our new initiative for financial independence. I'd chosen the name because willows bend without breaking, because they survive storms by yielding, not fighting. Later that night, I sat in bed with a book but found myself rereading the same sentence over and over. My mind wandered back to the girl I'd been at 20, hungry for approval, desperate to be seen. I wanted to tell her it would all make sense someday, that every heartbreak, every betrayal, every empty night spent working towards something unseen would lead here to this quiet, solid peace. Around midnight, I got a message from Mark. "Congratulations on the grant. Proud of you." I typed back, "Thank you for teaching me that silence isn't weakness," he replied. "You taught yourself that." I smiled, set the phone down, and turned off the light. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight spilled across the room again, golden and calm. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and began drafting a letter to the donors who supported the housing program. At the bottom I wrote, "We don't build revenge, we build recovery." Before hitting send, I paused to look at the framed photo of the house on Willow Creek. I'd thought about taking it down many times, but now it served a different purpose. It wasn't a wound anymore, it was proof of transformation. I whispered to the photo, "You were never home. You were just the beginning." Outside the world was stirring again, horns, footsteps, laughter. The noise didn't bother me anymore. I'd built a new kind of quiet around it. As I stepped out the door for another long day, I realized something simple: power didn't mean being louder than the people who once silenced you. It meant not needing to speak for them at all. I smiled, locking the door behind me, the morning air cool and bright. The city stretched ahead, vast and open. My life no longer felt like something I had to reclaim, it was something I could finally live. The morning light spilled through the glass doors, turning the ocean silver. I stood barefoot on the terrace, coffee warm in my hands, the air salted and soft. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to noise inside my head. No unfinished arguments, no invisible weight pressing on my chest. Just the sound of waves folding over themselves, steady and endless. I used to think silence was something forced upon me. Now it was what I'd chosen, and I guarded it the way some people guard their fortunes. The kettle still whistled in the kitchen when I noticed an envelope on the counter, pale cream against the marble. No return address, just my name written in the handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. My mother's. I hesitated before touching it. The last time she wrote it was an invoice disguised as a letter. This one was different. The script was smaller, almost careful. I slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the page. "I saw the news about your foundation. You've built something good, Lydia. Maybe we all needed you to go first. I hope you're well. No apologies, no explanations, just that." I read it twice, waiting for anger or grief to come. Neither did. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and smiled. Forgiveness didn't always look like reunions. Sometimes it was just peace that no longer asked for permission. That afternoon, I stood in front of a crowded conference room, filled with faces, women of all ages, some in suits, some in borrowed blouses, all carrying stories that looked a little like mine. Behind me, a banner read, "The Willow Project, Rebuilding from Silence." I didn't write speeches anymore. I just spoke. When I started this, I said I thought it was about revenge, about proving something. But revenge fades. What lasts is rebuilding. Every woman here has been told she's the strong one, the dependable one, the one who doesn't need help. Maybe you were told that strength means staying silent. I believed that too. Until I realized silence can build, not just break. The room was still quiet in that reverent way when everyone is breathing the same truth. I continued softly. "We can't choose the families we come from, but we can choose the ones we build. And sometimes building means starting over brick by brick without applause." When I finished, the applause came anyway. I smiled, not because I needed it, but because it sounded like gratitude. The kind that lives in the space where pain used to be. After the event, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been older than 25. "Do you ever miss them?" she asked. "Who?" I said. "The people who hurt you." I looked at her for a moment. "I miss who I thought I was with them," I said. "But I love who I am without them more." That night, the event space emptied and I lingered behind, gathering papers and stray coffee cups. The air still buzzed with laughter and the faint smell of perfume. I stepped outside onto the terrace where the city stretched below, and Mark was already there, waiting with 2 glasses of wine. "You disappeared," he said. "I figured you were hiding from your own success." I was just catching my breath. He handed me a glass. "To catching your breath, then?" I laughed, clinking mine gently against his. He leaned on the railing. "Do you ever think about how far you've come sometimes?" "Usually, when I'm too tired to doubt it." He smiled. "So do you still think about revenge?" "Not really," I said. "Revenge was the beginning. Peace is the ending." He nodded. "You earned it." "Maybe," I said, looking out at the skyline, lights flickering like heartbeat monitors. "But peace doesn't need to be earned, just accepted." When he left, I stayed on the terrace, the night air brushing my hair, the wine gone warm in my hand. Somewhere below, I could hear waves crashing against the pier. It sounded like a reminder that everything eventually returns to itself. Later inside, I sat at my desk and pulled a clean sheet of paper from the drawer. The same drawer where I'd placed my mother's letter that morning. I wrote "Dear Lydia," and paused. For a long time, my letters had been to them, to the people who took to the family, that forgot, to ghosts that wouldn't leave me alone. This one was to myself. You did it. You built the thing they said you couldn't. You walked away without looking back. You learned that silence is not surrender, and that peace is not the absence of sound, but the presence of truth. Keep walking forward. Keep building. Keep breathing. I signed my name, folded the letter, and placed it inside the manuscript I'd been working on building from silence. My story written in pieces over nights, when the past tried to whisper too loud. When I finally closed the cover, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like an answer. Just before sunrise, I walked down to the beach. The sand was cool, the tide low, the horizon streaked with light. I stood there barefoot, letting the water reach my ankles. For years, I had waited for apologies, for closure, for someone else to declare the story over. But standing there with the sea breathing against the shore, I understood something simple. Closure isn't a door someone else closes for you. It's a door you build yourself and then walk through alone. The sun broke fully over the horizon, turning the water gold. I raised my coffee mug to it, smiling. If you've ever been silenced, I said quietly, to the waves, don't wait for permission to speak again. Build something. A life. A dream. A home that's yours. I let the tide wash over my feet, the foam cool and soft. The camera would pull back here, I imagined. Just the ocean, infinite and calm. My story ending where it began, with silence, but this time it's mine. And if you're hearing this now, if you've followed me all the way here, maybe you've lived through something like it. Maybe someone once took something from you and called it love. Tell me, what would you build from it? Because I'd love to hear your story. And if a piece of mine found its way into your heart, stay a while. Leave a comment, share your silence. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the furthest. And sometimes peace doesn't arrive with thunder. It comes on the sound of waves.